Welcome, welcome to the Lion Legal Channel. And today, what we're going to be doing is something incredibly important, incredibly interesting, which is essentially going through the indictment, the Trump indictment, to see exactly what Trump has been charged with, exactly trying to get to the bottom of this issue. So hold on to your seats, make sure to watch because this will be an important podcast.
Well, I want to thank you, and it's great to be back in Alabama with so many proud American patriots who stand for God, family, and country. That's what you stand for. I want to thank Governor Kay Ivey for being with us tonight, and the great Kay. You look great, Kay. I'm not surprised. Doing a good job, too. We appreciate it very much. Thank you. And also Chairman John Wall. He broke all sorts of records tonight. They broke the attendance and the fundraising records. They broke every record in the book. So John, really good job. Please sit down. We're going to be here for a little while, right? Sit down. Thank you very much. But John's been a friend really from the beginning, and today I'm also greatly honored to receive the endorsements of so many outstanding Alabama leaders. We have just about all of them that we were looking for. They've been warriors with me, and they know how we fight, and they know how to fight, and they know that we win. Most of whom, though, are with us tonight, including your great senator who just introduced me, Tommy Tuberville. What a great man. He's strong, he's smart, he's loyal. And he's truly a fantastic guy, and he's my friend, and we love Tommy. Treat him good. You have one of the really, thank you. We have one of the great ones there. Representatives Jerry Carl, Barry Moore, Mike Rogers, Robert Adderholt, Dale Strong, and Gary Palmer. These are warriors. Gary's feeling better now. He had a little problem with the back, but he's feeling good, and he wanted to be here, and I appreciate it. But these are fantastic people.
Okay, now transitioning to the actual indictment itself, I'm going to pull this up so that you exactly see what he is charged with. Okay, so right, this essentially goes to the fact that he's been alleged to have conducted a scheme to convince other people to engage in overturning the election. And now there are four specific counts. Count one is conspiracy to defraud the United States, which is essentially legalese for getting people together to undermine the institutions, elections, government agencies in the United States. That is what it means, conspiracy to defraud the United States. Second count, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. Now, you can imagine what that is. In order for a public official to be elected to office, there will be certain things that take place, certain proceedings that take place. If you try to obstruct that, you try to obstruct a court process, you try to obstruct any official process that is sanctioned and facilitated by the government, that will be in contravention of count two, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. The count three is obstruction of and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. Now, conspiracy means an agreement to do something illegal. This count specifically is stating that obstruction was actually done and was attempted to be done. So that's what obstruction and attempt to obstruct means. And then the fourth count is conspiracy against rights. Now, if you read the indictment, it's incredibly interesting and delves into the machinations of what took place. The indictment starts in a very innocuous or banal way. which states the defendant Donald J. Trump was the 45th president of the United States and a candidate for re-election in 2020. The defendant lost the 2020 presidential election. So obviously you see that the prosecutors have stated their point of view, in which they will now state that the defendant, Donald J. Trump, disagreed with illegally. And then it goes on to say, despite having lost, the defendant was determined to remain in power. So for more than 2 months following election day on November 3rd, 2020, the defendant spread lies that there has been outcome determinative fraud in the election and that he had actually won. Sound ominous. Okay. So the indictment goes on to say that shortly after election day, the defendant also pursued unlawful means of discounting legitimate votes and subverting election results. In doing so, he perpetrated 3 criminal conspiracies. And then it goes on to list the charges which have been listed at the beginning. To count 1 is conspiracy to defraud the U.S. And it states that the purpose of the conspiracy was to use false claims of election fraud to obstruct the federal government function. Now, you can't skip over this. You can't skip over this, and I'll tell you why after we read this again. He said the purpose of the conspiracy was to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election by using knowingly false claims of election fraud to obstruct the federal government function by which the results are collected, counted, and certified. Knowingly false. That would essentially mean that Trump knew the allegations were not true when he made them. The allegation that the election was stolen, it was a fraud, etc. They're essentially stating here that he knew they were false. So in a sense, they have to get inside his head or get some proof that shows he knew that he was saying things which were patently false, completely untrue. That's interesting. But what actually took place is more interesting in a sense, because it goes on to describe the actions in several different states. So page 9 says that the defendant turned to co-conspirator 1, whom he announced would spearhead his efforts going forward to challenge the election results. From that point on, the defendant and his co-conspirators executed a strategy to use knowing deceit in the targeted states to impair, obstruct, and defeat the federal government function, including as described below. And then specifically states the separate places where the actions were alleged to have taken place. So in Arizona, for example, the indictment specifies that 8 days before Arizona's governor certified the ascertainment of the state's legitimate electors based on the popular vote, the defendant and his co-conspirator called the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives and made knowingly false claims of election fraud aimed at interfering with the ascertainment of and voting by Arizona's election. As followed, defendant and co-conspirator 1 falsely asserted, amongst other things, that a substantial number of non-citizens, non-residents, and dead people had voted fraudulently in Arizona. The Speaker of the House and asked co-conspirator 1 for evidence of these claims, which seemingly co-conspirator 1 did not have. So that's an example of what took place in Arizona. And then even on January 4th, 2021, a second co-conspirator called the Arizona House Speaker to urge him to use a majority of the legislature to decertify the state's legitimate electors. Arizona's validly ascertained elected had voted 3 weeks earlier and sent their votes to Congress, which was scheduled to count those votes in Biden's favor in just 2 days' time at the January 6th certification proceeding, when the Arizona House Speaker explained that the state investigations had uncovered no evidence of substantial fraud in the state. Co-conspirator 2 conceded that he didn't know enough about the facts on the ground in Arizona, but nonetheless told the Arizona House Speaker to decertify and let the courts sort it out. The Arizona House Speaker refused, stating that he would not play with the oath he had taken to uphold the United States Constitution and Arizona law. Interesting. Okay, and then in Georgia, obviously you know exactly what happened in Georgia, the background of what occurred. And it goes on to say that what happened is that an emissary of Trump filed a lawsuit against the governor of Georgia, falsely alleging massive election fraud accomplished through the voting machine company's election software and hardware. Massive election fraud. So it appears that the indictment is essentially dealing with actions that are taking place across the whole of the states, different locations, different venues where this occurred. So you had Georgia, and that particular section of the indictment culminates in stating that on January 6th, the defendant publicly repeated the knowingly false insinuation that more than 10,300 dead people had voted in Georgia. It goes on to say Michigan. The defendant claimed that there had been a suspicious dump of votes, purportedly illegitimate ballots, stating in Detroit there were hours of unexplained delay in delivering many of the votes for counting. The final batch did not arrive until 4 in the morning, even though polls closed at 8 o'clock. So they brought in, and the batches came in. Nobody knew where they came from. Interesting. So it further goes on to say, upon leaving there, meeting the Michigan House Speaker and the Michigan Majority Leader issued a statement reiterating this. The Senate and the House Oversight Committees are actively engaged in a thorough review of Michigan's elections process, and we have faith in the committee process to provide greater transparency and accountability to our citizens. We have not yet been made aware of any information that would change the outcome of the election in Michigan, and as legislative leaders, we will follow the law and follow the normal process regarding Michigan's elections, just as we have said throughout the election. So basically, that is political speak for nothing to see here. And then, of course, the indictment goes on to reiterate that there are more allegations of malfeasance in Michigan. In Pennsylvania, for example, it states that Trump publicly maligned the Philadelphia City Commissioner for stating on the news that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in Philadelphia. And the day after, Pennsylvania's governor signed a certificate of ascertainment and thus certified to the federal government that Biden's electors were legitimate. An emissary of Trump orchestrated an event at a hotel in Gettysburg attended by state legislators where there were false claims of absentee ballots being received. And then there are further claims about things which Trump had done in Wisconsin. So it's certainly a very long document, 45 pages, which lists in detail the allegations against Trump, and it's interesting to read, interesting and voluminous. And that's just the first count. That is just the first count. The second count essentially refers to the instances that had been discussed prior in the indictment and states that there was a conspiracy to obstruct the official proceeding. And specifically that Trump did knowingly combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with co-conspirators to corruptly obstruct and impede an official proceeding. And the third count follows a similar vein of obstruction and intent to obstruct. And the fourth count states that the conspiracy was for the purpose of threatening, oppressing, intimidating the free exercise or an enjoyment of a right and privilege secured to allow the right to vote. And in this case, it would be the rights of those, obviously, who voted against him to prevent their vote from being counted. Now the issue is how impactful is this particular indictment compared to the other indictments? How impactful is this indictment compared to the others? I would say that essentially the New York indictment is the weakest of all three. It's not very strong because it calls on one to essentially assume what's in Trump's mind when the tax fraud and the false filings took place. And in order to present that to a jury or a judge in a bench trial, in order to prevent that cogently, whereby they would be prepared to convict a suspect beyond a reasonable doubt, which is essentially the highest standard in law, you would have to have very compelling evidence, almost to the point of certainty. I don't think that is the case there. And most legal experts that actually saw that case, watched that case, felt that they did not feel that either. Now, in the second case, the confidential documents case, that is a much stronger case. That's a much stronger case. The issue with that case is that it relies heavily on the testimony of other people who had interacted with Trump. That's not easy because by the time you have to rely on witnesses, they can be impeached. You can show that the witnesses have misremembered things, that they are not truthful, that they should not be trusted, etc. So, with testimonial evidence of people that may have biases or can potentially be discredited, there is an issue. There is an issue there. However, it's a much stronger case than the New York case. In this particular case, this is probably also a stronger case than the New York case, given that there are alleged conspirators in this case. In order to have a conspiracy, you must have an agreement between two or more people to do something. So to find out what the agreement is, several different things can be presented in court. You can have the testimony of one of the conspirators who says that, yes, they did agree to do X, Y, Z. You might have documentary evidence, text messages, emails, phone taps, etc., presented there. The hardest part in a case is if you say a person stated or pushed an idea that they felt was knowingly false, you would have to show that they knew it was false in the first case, that they knew what they were doing was based on deceit. And that is not always easy, because how do you prove what's in a person's head if they have not said anything to the contrary? That is the real question. So the indictment itself stands aside. The next stage is the evidence. What is the evidence that you can actually support the indictment, prove the indictment, and convict an individual? That'll be very interesting to see. So that's a brief summary of what is in the latest indictment against Trump. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.